CEO Live Talks.
I am Dr. Swannie Jett, and I have a passion for public health for over 30 years. Now, I'm in a position to affect change, and these are the critical conversations about health in our community with the people who can help me make those changes. Good afternoon. Welcome to CEO Live Talks. I'm your host, Dr. Swannie Jett, and today I welcome a good friend, Mr. Holt. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I got to bring you on camera just to have a meeting.
It was time. It was time.
You know, you've been a busy man. So,
Yeah.
you know, usually how I do these shows, I try to get into a little bit of a person's background.
Okay.
You know, this show is called CEO Live Talks, and it's about, you know, getting to the top of the profession, but also there's a history, there's a background, how a person arrived. I know you're a Louisville native, but, you know, tell us a little bit about your background and your upbringing.
Yeah. So again, Louisville native. This is home for me. And when it was time to go to college, I realized that it was good for me to get away from Louisville. I didn't go too far though. Went to Eastern Kentucky University, graduated there, and began my career working in public relations at the University of Kentucky. And was an incredible experience for me. Really got a chance to build some professional chops in an environment where the people who hired me were committed to nurturing me and making sure that I was well groomed as a professional. And so I took that for granted, went to my next job at UPS where I had a very similar experience. UPS Airlines here in Louisville, Kentucky recruited me to come back to town in '98. That's why I'm here in Louisville. I had other plans to take on the world from somewhere else, but Kentucky just wouldn't let me get away. And so I came back in '98, had a great experience at UPS, and got recruited away from there to go work for an internet startup company that had this huge vision of taking over the world.
Sound like Google.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, was an investor in this company.
Okay.
And they poured a lot of money into trying to get ahead of the internet boom. And they dangled a number in front of me as a young professional, still in my 20s. They gave me a six-figure salary, an incredible budget, and a department that they said I could run how I wanted to run it. And Dr. Jett, I remember taking that job, and 3 months later, being absolutely miserable.
Oh, wow.
Being miserable because I realized I took a job just for money. And those two previous jobs that I'd had were warm environments where I was nurtured and I was groomed, and there was a real intention about helping me grow as a professional.
Right.
In this environment, it was about let's get this bottom line moving.
Right.
And it was fast paced, it was high energy, it was emotionless, and it didn't resonate with me.
Okay.
And so I will tell you, when that company grew too fast and grew itself out of business, you would have never seen someone so happy to be out of a job than I was when that happened. I did.
So, you know, you grew up in Louisville. Where did you grow up at?
227 South 39th Street.
Okay, so you were in the heart of West End. How was the neighborhood back then?
Oh, man. There was so much love and a real sense of community. Like, I knew who my neighbors were. You know, it was nothing for us to get a knock on the door at 7 o'clock at night from somebody in the neighborhood saying, can we borrow some sugar?
Right.
Can we borrow some eggs? It was nothing for my mother to send me down the street to Miss Williams' house and ask if we get a cup of milk to make some cornbread, or,
Right.
you know, those kind of things. And so it was just this great sense of community in every way, where although it was still relatively impoverished community,
Right.
it didn't feel like it
Right.
because there was so much
It was
love.
a village.
Yeah, it was.
It was a
It was. And we looked out for one another. We supported one another. We knew and understood one another's needs and protected one another for the most part. So it was a beautiful experience growing up in West Louisville.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I saw a different place of Louisville when I came in 95, 94. totally different than what I see now.
Yeah.
Totally different. Because I remember going to Shawnee Park. Sundays was the premium day.
Yeah.
Go to Shawnee Park, sit,
That's right.
have a few drinks, smoke, fellas, and Chickasaw Park. And now I still see a little bit of it on Sundays, but
Yeah.
not as much as I used to.
Right.
So something has happened. It's been a fracture.
I think we've lost that sense of community. I think we see it everywhere we go. I mean, when you start to look around at the institutions that were the anchors in our communities, institutions like churches, for instance. Churches are losing enrollment. Boys and Girls Clubs, the YMCA, those institutions that were rooted in our community don't exist in the way that they used to, and people don't show up to them in the way that they used to, which means that the places where we would galvanize as a people, the things that would galvanize us, don't do that in the way that they used to. And we operate in our separate units and spaces. And I think as a result of that, instead of community, we find ourselves operating with a much greater sense of individualism, which I think is dangerous.
It is very dangerous. So you grew up in a household, you had siblings?
I had a sister who's 4 years younger than I am. We grew up with a single mom. My dad, when my mom and dad separated, moved to Washington, D.C. And so I used to spend my summers and holiday vacations in Washington, D.C. And grew up here in Louisville with my sister.
So how was it, the difference between living in Louisville and then going to D.C.? Because we're talking about two different cultures.
Oh, two completely different cultures. So when I would go to D.C., I hated it because they called me a Bama.
Probably because of the accent. I can see that. That's hilarious.
They would.
But the women love the accent. Well, so don't get it messed up.
Well, so they joked about it, but there was an embrace. There was. I love D.C. and D.C. loved me. It's still one of my favorite places to go visit. But D.C. itself is different now.
D.C. is like
it's a much different place as well. But that experience really kind of helped provide some balance for me, because as much as we here in Kentucky see Louisville as the big city, when you go to somewhere like D.C. that's moving a lot faster and operating with, I would say, a greater sense of sophistication around certain issues as a city, you come back to Louisville and you recognize that we are maybe a step or two behind.
Plus, you had a little bit more insight. The music.
Yes.
You got the music
the
factor,
go-go.
the go-go, the culture, the foods. Because if you in Kentucky, you don't get, at that time, when you was growing up, there wasn't a lot of diversity.
No.
Compared to being in D.C. where you had a different culture.
It was Chocolate City then. It's a much different environment now. When I would go to D.C., I would stay with my cousin, who was like my big brother, and he lived in Southeast D.C. on East Capitol, which was really kind of the hood. And so when I go back to D.C. now, go to East Capitol, instead of seeing the hood, you see white women walking poodles and drinking Starbucks on East Capitol. So it's a much different experience now in Southeast D.C.
The whole entire area. So the interesting thing, moving forward, what lessons did you gain in D.C.?
Well, D.C. to me was a lot about community, friendship, networks. I started to recognize that as someone who would move into that space singularly, because even in my college years, I went back to D.C. and did internships. And so, going there earlier, in those earlier years, I was there with my cousin, my family, and had friends and networks. But then when you start moving in those professional spaces and you're by yourself and you don't have that village around you, you start learning how to scrap a little bit. You don't.
D.C. is one of those places.
It is. And you learn that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And you start learning how to speak up for yourself. You start learning how to move in a little bit more aggressive way in order to accomplish the things that you need to. So D.C. was good for me in that way. It was also the place where I learned to drive, so I can run you over on the side of the road if I need to. But there's a lot of aggressive behavior in D.C.
Not like New York, but it's very aggressive. Very aggressive. So what lesson did you learn from your father?
Well, my father was not when he moved to D.C., so he wasn't around
Okay.
as regularly as he was before he moved.
Okay.
But the thing that I picked up from my dad, and I think it's as much DNA as it is anything else, but he has an incredible gift to gab.
Okay.
My father can talk with anybody, and I do mean anybody, and I mean in a real meaningful, in-depth sort of way.
He was there in the moment.
Yeah, he absolutely was.
Right.
He was engaged, but he also paid attention to the world around him. He read the newspaper, he watched the news, and I was enamored by that. So much so that I became a journalism and English major when I went to college and became a news junkie.
Hello, my name is Sierra Clark, and I'm the Chronic Disease Manager at DuValle Community Health Center. Ever since I started at DuValle over 9 years ago, I have been committed to helping patients live healthier lifestyles. I am currently serving patients in the Chronic Care Management Program, or CCM program. My team and I help patients manage their chronic conditions such as obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. In this CCM program, you will receive several benefits to help you manage your health. We offer monthly telephone calls to check in with your progress and to assist you with any concerns, assistance with scheduling your healthcare appointments, and assistance with filling your prescriptions in a timely and convenient manner. We also offer many resources to help you with the barriers you may face with eating healthy, being physically active, or monitoring your conditions at home. For more information, visit us online at pdchc.org or visit one of our health centers.
People don't readily talk about the father still being present to
Yeah.
a certain extent. But one of the clear lessons I learned from my father was, he had a newspaper every day, and he encouraged me to read the newspaper and not just the sports section where I was
Right,
at.
right.
Because I would go see my name. But he had to have an incentive, so his was always bringing me a lollipop.
Oh, okay.
The lemon glow pop, I think that's what it was, with the gum in the middle.
Yeah. I remember those.
So if he brought me one of those, I read the newspaper. Now, he don't know I was going to read it anyway, but just the sports
There
section.
was an incentive.
That was an incentive. But that was a lesson that he taught me for somebody that didn't go to college. That it was like, you need to stay abreast of worldly news.
Yeah. Well, my dad was, and I had to hear it from his friends because when I would hear it from him, I wouldn't believe it.
Right.
But my dad was, he was a high school basketball superstar.
Okay.
He played at Shawnee High School, and he'd tell me the stories about him jumping out of the gym and being an elite player and having all of these colleges recruit him. My father, however, as a high school student, while he was riding a bike in West Louisville, got hit by a bus.
Okay.
And it messed up his athletic career. He wasn't able to go to college. And so as much as he was relying on his athleticism to create a pathway to college for him, that didn't happen. And so his son, he wanted to make sure didn't have to rely on those sort of things in order to build a college career. And so I don't know that I would have had that anyway because at Doss High School, my high school basketball coach was my father's high school basketball coach.
Oh, wow.
And I remember one day in practice, I tripped and fell over the line on the floor, and Bill White, the coach, stood over me and looked down at me and said, "Boy, you sure ain't your daddy." And that's when I knew I needed to find me a different path. I had to find a different path, and so it was less about my hands and feet and a whole lot more about what was inside my head.
That is that is cruel.
But it was what I needed to hear. It was what I needed to hear.
He could have kept it to himself though.
No, that's not
until
Bill.
4
That's
years.
not Bill. That's not Bill.
Because my coach didn't tell me that he coached my father until I was a senior.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
So I didn't know my father was a superstar football player, running back, and linebacker.
Okay.
So I didn't know he had offers D1 to go to Michigan, all this stuff. So I'm playing for this coach. Get to my senior year, I got Iowa and all these. And I was like, man, this coach, it feels something different about it. Well, he had to axe the grind.
Yeah.
My mother is the one that told me.
Oh, so you
was
found out later on.
Yeah, I found out later on. And I used to wonder why he yelled at me all the time. He had circumstances. You can do this, you can do that. I'm like, man, but what did you do?
Made you better?
it just pissed me off because my father didn't yell at me. So if somebody yelled at me, immediately I had an attitude.
I get it.
Right?
I get it.
It didn't make me play no better.
I get
I'm
it.
just pissed off at him.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm still probably pissed off at him.
I get it. I get it.
So, growing up, you was in Louisville, you had your mom.
Mm-hmm.
What lessons did she give you?
Oh, man. My mother was just an incredibly hard worker. She was the person who helped me figure out there's always a way.
Right.
When we didn't know how we were going to make it, we didn't know how things were going to turn out, she always seemed to find a way to make things right, to make things better. And she was the hardest worker I've ever seen. And so I think my work ethic definitely came from my mother. My ability to always be able to try to find the solution.
Okay.
There's always a solution to the problem. And my mom helped me figure out that you don't give up until you find. You don't
So
stop.
it sounds like you got a balance between your mother and your father, the gift of gab, and also the work ethic from both of them, and finding a different path.
Yeah, yeah.
But that doesn't always define a leader. So somewhere along the path, what skills did you learn in terms of how to be a great leader, a motivator?
Well, I will tell you, for me, it came by way of mentors. So as much as my mom and dad provided certain examples for me, I have been incredibly blessed to have mentors who've poured into me, especially early in my career, people who saw things in me that I didn't even see in myself, and would take me under their wing and expose me to people and places that really just kind of help prepare me for where I am now. And sometimes in those environments where those mentors are giving you access, you don't show up and try to puff your chest out and take over the space. A lot of times for me, it was just a matter of showing up in those spaces and listening and learning and watching how others move in those spaces so that I could figure out how to operate in those environments when my time came.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things you bring up is, I have learned the ability along the way to identify somebody and see something that they don't see.
Yeah.
And help them along the path. A lot of times that wasn't done for me. It was in our era, it was shied away.
Yeah.
And I felt it when I first came to Louisville. Instead of somebody help groom you to put you in the spot, people were more threatened.
Yeah.
And that happens
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
So what lessons have you, because somebody bestowed that to you, have you bestowed it back to somebody else?
Well, I will tell you, it's interesting you say that because, I don't know, maybe about 3.5 years ago, something clicked for me. Because early on in my career, I was always the youngest, it seemed, in some of those leadership roles and rooms that I found myself in. In many cases, I was the only Black in those spaces. And so I just had this desire to grind and prove myself in those spaces. And so it was just this constant grind to show people that I belonged in those spaces. And then after a while, when you start accomplishing certain things and you begin to check boxes and show that, yeah, I did that, I belong in these spaces, one day it dawned on me that I need to pivot from that grind to prove that I belong in those spaces to now making room and space to be the teacher and helping other people figure out how they fit and can succeed in those spaces. And so I've been really intentional over these last 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years now about making room to mentor young and up and coming professionals, even some high school students, to help them figure out their pathway. Because like people saw in me, I've been able to identify potential in a lot of the young people that I've become a mentor to. And the job that I feel is my responsibility now is to pour into them the way people had poured into me so that they can have some tools that they use to create their own path. And the beautiful thing is when you start to see them stepping into their space and finding their confidence and becoming successful. It's a beautiful feeling.
Makes you feel good.
It does. It really does. It does. And then I've been at it so long in some cases that I'm starting to see some of my mentees become mentors to other people. And so the cycle continues, which is a
That's a
beautiful
beauty.
thing.
Hello, I'm Dr. Swannie Jett, CEO for Park DuValle Community Health Centers. We conduct WIC, nutrition, and open enrollment for healthcare. So this is a one-stop shop facility for everybody in the community. Hello, I'm Dr. Swannie Jett. Please make sure you visit one of our 5 locations, not only in Louisville, but outside of Louisville and surrounding areas. Thank you. You know, one key thing, because, you know, we both have had a lot of troubles and in leadership roles. So you've had a transition recently. I remember, you know, there was a time when I was not the top dog, but I was in a mix, right? And I figured out it was time for me to step out on my own.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, quiet as it kept, a lot of people don't talk about sometimes you can outshine the top dog. Right? You can be that figurehead to do that, and you have to know when it's time. Did you ever come to a point in your life when you thought that?
Yeah, you know, it's never been my intent to outshine anyone.
Right.
It's not, and I don't operate in that sort of way, and especially not someone who's on my team.
When you already got the glow, you can't take away the shine.
and so for me, it was just about being my best self.
Right.
And when I'm at my best, I can shine a little bit.
Right.
And I've recognized over my career that rubs some people the wrong way.
Correct.
And I've had to come to the understanding that that's more their problem than it is mine.
That's right.
Because there was once upon a time when I started to recognize that, and I was considering dialing back who I was.
Right.
And but then I wasn't authentically me.
Right.
And I was failing at trying to be something that I wasn't,
Right.
and realized that the best I could offer is the best that I can be. And I just decided that that's what I'm going to commit myself to. And those who can embrace it will embrace it, and those who don't won't. But the thing that I've understood and realized is that those gifts will make room and space for me, and they have. And I've been able to use my gifts, my talents to really help not only advance my career, but the work that I've been committed to. And at this point, it's worked for me, so I'm not backing away from that.
So, you know, the key things I learned in my journey, and, you know, and I probably got this, man, it seems like a long time ago, probably about 2007. I was working at Louisville Metro, and of course I was 3 years into Dr. Trotman's stint.
It's one of my mentors.
And you know, I knew where I was leading to, right? And I was starting to do speaking gigs. Even though I was there prior to him, I was in the environmental division. But then I took over Office of Men's Health, and I took from him that persona and that stage presence, right? Because he wasn't my mentor, even though I worked for him.
Okay.
I think Ryan Irvin probably got more mentorship from him.
Okay.
But I learned how, I knew the operation totally.
Okay.
Because I had worked at every department in the health department.
Yeah.
So I learned that aspect. And I took the persona of how to be the outward speaker in front of the audience and talk to crowds. I already knew how to speak, but it was the big picture and how to, you know, welcome you to a city, press conferences, you know. And so I took that, and I guess when we first had our meeting, I went to Bullitt County.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so you can see the total persona come out in Bullitt County.
You got a chance to
step out front. And then from Bullitt County, it actually took me to the national level, which a lot of people didn't realize. In 2 years, Now I'm sitting on the board with Dr. Troutman. Right?
Isn't that something?
So that's something to think about.
Yeah.
And not dialing back who you are.
Right.
And then 2 years after that, well, actually 3 years, 2 years after that, I became the president-elect, and I became president for NACCHO. And I
Isn't that
became the
something?
first black president
Yeah.
for NACCHO
Isn't that something?
from understanding who I was.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand, and I'm glad you recognize that, and that's a lesson for kids. Sometimes it's not that you overshadowing the person that's at the top seat. You might need to move some other place.
Well, you know, there was an early example in my life that really kind of put me on the path where I was committed to find the best in me. And it really happened in the 12th grade at Doss High School. When I was at Doss, 12th grade English teacher asked our class where we were going to college. And at the time, it was early in the school year, I didn't know, hadn't selected a college. And later on in the school year, I determined that I was going to go to Eastern Kentucky University. And that was a big deal. I'm a journalism and English major.
You went to Richmond.
And I went to go tell my high school English teacher that I was going to EKU. Now, I thought she'd be excited because she went to EKU. She was an English major. And I went and told her, Dr. Jett, I'll never forget in my life, as long as I live, what she said to me. I said, I'm going to Eastern Kentucky University, where you went. And she looked at me and she said, you won't make it.
Wow.
She said, I wouldn't make it. And I don't know why she said that. I was an average student, not in trouble, those kind of things. But I just remember it stung so bad. It was like 1,000 bees stung me all at once. Wow. And I didn't say anything. I remember going back to my seat but being hurt. And then I remember going to school. And you ever see those movies where the man goes to prison and he puts a picture up on the wall of the person who sent him to prison, and every day he's doing push-ups and sit-ups and thinking about when I get out.
I'm gonna do it. Right.
So that's what it was like in college for me. It was about proving this lady wrong. And so when I got to EKU, I joined the school newspaper and became Writer of the Year. And I went and took that award, put it on the copy machine, put a note on it, sent it to Doss High School and said, just wanted you to know. And won these other awards and always made sure that my teacher back at Doss High School got a note from me to see how I was doing. But as much as I thought the story might end there, as my career progressed, I was recruited to become the assistant superintendent at JCPS when Dr. Sheldon Berman was superintendent here at the school district. And so I was essentially over external affairs as assistant superintendent, oversaw several departments. And one day, Dr. Jett, I was looking over this. One day, I was looking at the org chart at JCPS and saw that the superintendent was here. I was right here, and I had all these departments under me and these hundreds of people who fed up to me one way or the other. And way down here at the bottom was my high school English teacher who told me I wouldn't make it. She worked for me.